They dragged me out of Blackburn Tower before I could even understand what had happened, my feet scraping against the concrete as reporters swarmed around me like a storm. Microphones jabbed toward my face. Camera lights blinded me. Someone shouted my full name as if I were a criminal on the run. Another voice yelled that they had the video, the proof, the scandal. And everywhere I looked, phone screens glowed with the same frozen frame of me leaning over Ethan Blackburn, the billionaire CEO of the company whose floors I scrubbed for a living. I heard one reporter scream, "Janitor kisses billionaire boss," inappropriate contact during board meeting. Someone else muttered, "Gold digger, desperate single mom, unbelievable." My stomach twisted into a hard knot, and for a moment I could not breathe. They made it sound like I had thrown myself at him, like I had crossed every boundary for attention or money. But the truth was nothing like the lie the world wanted to believe. I whispered to myself almost too quietly for anyone to hear. They think I tried to kiss him. They think I wanted something from him. But I was trying to keep him alive. That truth pulled me straight back into the moment everything went wrong. Just minutes earlier, I had been on the 42nd floor hallway of Blackburn Tower, pushing my cleaning cart forward, humming a lullaby my daughter insisted I sing every night. My body ached from the double shift. Elena had coughed until dawn, and I had slept maybe 2 hours. But exhaustion never excused me from working. I was invisible in that building, unseen and unheard, just a uniform that moved from one end of the corridor to another. I remember passing a group of executives. None of them looked at me. They rarely did. Their voices carried discussions about stocks, acquisitions, deadlines, things that belonged to a world far beyond my reach. Then I heard a crash. A chair slammed back. Gasps filled the air. Someone shouted the CEO's name like a warning. "Ethan Blackburn." I ran. Instinct, fear, adrenaline, something in me took over. The boardroom doors were open, and the scene inside froze my blood. Ethan lay on the floor, his body twisted, his eyes half open but empty. His lips were already turning blue. A dozen people stood around him, but not a single person touched him. A woman whispered about liability. A man shook his head and said he was not certified to help. And then someone lifted his phone and began recording. My heart split open at the sight. Years earlier, I had watched the father of my child collapse in our apartment, and I could do nothing. That helplessness became the reason I learned CPR at a free community class. Now here I was staring at another man turning gray, and once again, no one moved. I dropped to my knees beside him. His chest was still. His pulse was gone. I pressed my hands over his sternum and began compressions, counting in my head to keep from panicking. I felt his ribs shift under the pressure. Someone behind me gasped as if I were hurting him rather than trying to save him. 30 compressions, 2 breaths, the rhythm drilled into my bones. My lungs burned. Sweat blurred my vision. I tilted his head back and breathed for him. His body stayed limp. I did it again and again. "Please breathe. Please breathe." Then suddenly he jerked beneath my hands. A loud, harsh gasp tore from his throat. His chest rose in a broken rhythm. His eyes flickered open and landed on mine for one disoriented second. Relief crashed over me so hard I nearly collapsed beside him, but the room did not celebrate. Instead, a sharp voice sliced through the tension. "What do you think you are doing? Who told you to touch him?" A director of operations stood there with fury burning in his eyes. Behind him, a woman from PR kept her phone raised, recording only the moments where my face hovered over Ethan's. She had not filmed the collapse, the compressions, the desperate fight to bring him back. Only the part that looked like something it was not. I tried to speak, but the guards were already pulling me away, gripping my arms as if I were the one who had done harm. I looked back at Ethan, barely conscious, barely breathing, and then forward at the storm waiting outside the boardroom doors. And that was how I ended up shoved into the cold, surrounded by reporters drowning under accusations I had no chance to outrun. I had saved a man's life, and in the same 5 minutes, I watched mine fall apart. When I finally reached my apartment that night, the cold followed me inside as if it refused to let me breathe. The heater had died sometime during the morning, leaving the small living room colder than the hallway outside. I shut the door behind me and pressed my back to it, letting the silence swallow me whole for a moment. Silence was easier than the noise of reporters, easier than the cameras, easier than hearing my name twisted into something I no longer recognized. I dropped my bag on the floor and forced myself to move toward Elena's room. Her cough echoed before I even opened the door. She sat on her small bed legs, crossed under her blanket, holding her little stuffed cat against her chest. When she saw me, she smiled wide, her eyes bright in a way that cut straight into me. "Mommy, you are home." I swallowed hard, pushing everything inside me down as deep as I could. I had always been good at hiding things from her. It was a skill single mothers learned early and perfected quickly. I knelt beside her bed and brushed her hair behind her ear. "How are you feeling, baby?" She shrugged and said the same thing she said every time she did not want to worry me. "I am okay, just a little tight in my chest." Her inhaler was nearly empty. I had been stretching its use for a week, hoping my next paycheck would come before she needed a refill. But now that paycheck was gone. My job was gone. And the truth of that pressed against my chest more sharply than any of the reporter's questions had. I kissed her forehead and told her I would warm something for dinner. She asked for noodles because that was her favorite. She did not understand it was also the only thing we had left. In the kitchen, I turned on the stove and waited for the single working burner to ignite. The apartment always felt smaller at night. Walls stained with moisture, a ceiling patched with tape after the last leak floorboards that groaned under every step. The kind of place people pretended not to notice when they visited, though no one ever visited me anymore. As the water boiled, I checked the small mirror above the sink. My lip was still swollen from where Ethan's teeth had caught me when he gasped back to life. There was a bruise forming across my cheek where a guard had grabbed me. I scrubbed at the stain of dried sweat on my shirt, remembering the way my hands had trembled during CPR. I had done everything I could for him, and look where it left me. The noodles finished cooking, and I carried 2 bowls to the living room. Elena wrapped herself in a blanket and sat beside me, blowing on her soup before taking a big slurping bite. She giggled when the steam fogged her glasses. I smiled because she needed me to, because she deserved a mother who looked calm and warm and certain. But inside me, a weight was growing heavier and heavier, sinking deeper with every thought. Should I tell her what happened? Should I wait? Should I lie? I did what I always did. I protected her. "How was work today, Mommy?" I hesitated only for a second. "It was fine, just a busy day." She nodded, satisfied, and kept eating. After dinner, while she colored a picture of a cat on the floor, I went into the bathroom to wash my face. The faucet sputtered and sprayed rusty water before turning clear. I cupped my hands and splashed my cheeks, watching the drops fall from my chin. The woman in the mirror looked older than she had that morning. Tired eyes, red skin from the cold outside, a tenderness in my jaw from clenching it too tightly. I pressed my palms to the edge of the sink and whispered, "What am I going to do?" I knew what would happen next. The company would replace me before sunrise. The agencies that hired contract cleaners would hear the rumors before noon, and the video, the awful 10-second video, would keep spreading until my name became something toxic. The internet never cared about the truth. A lie was easier to believe. I stepped out of the bathroom and found Elena asleep on the floor, her coloring book still open beside her. I carried her to bed, tucked the blanket around her small shoulders, and kissed her gently on the top of her head. Her breath rattled slightly. She needed that inhaler soon. I turned off the lights and sat in the living room alone, the silence of the apartment pressing against me until I felt I might break. I wanted to scream, but feared waking her. I wanted to cry, but had already learned that tears fixed nothing. Instead, I sat there with my thoughts spiraling. I replayed the CPR, the moment he gasped back to life, the look in his eyes when he saw me, and then the world crashing onto me without mercy or hesitation. I wondered if Ethan even knew what was happening. Maybe he was awake now. Maybe he had already seen the headlines. Maybe he thought I had done something terrible. Maybe he believed the lie too. That thought clawed something open in me. I wrapped my arms around myself and let the darkness swallow me. Hours passed before I finally stood and checked the freezer for anything left. a single bag of frozen vegetables, a box of waffles, nothing that could stretch more than a day. Rent was due in 8. I had $62 in my account and a daughter who needed medication. Falling into poverty did not happen slowly. It happened in one shove, one accusation, one lie, seen by millions. It happened in a single day. And as I stood there in my silent, freezing apartment, I realized I had already begun to fall. The next morning, I woke before the sun, not because I had slept well, but because the cold crept beneath my blanket and forced me up. Elena was still sleeping curled into a tight ball for warmth. I brushed my fingers across her cheek and told myself that whatever waited for me outside, I had to face it for her. I dressed quietly, pulling on my janitor uniform out of habit, even though something deep in my chest told me I would not need it anymore. I kissed Elena on the forehead, whispered that I would be back soon, and stepped into the hallway where stale air and flickering lights greeted me like usual. The bus ride to Blackburn Tower felt longer than usual. People stared at their phones, scrolling through feeds lit with outrage and excitement, but no one looked at me. Maybe they did not recognize me yet. Maybe I still had a few minutes before my world truly collapsed. When I stepped off the bus and saw the massive glass tower rising into the clouds, my breath caught. I had walked into that building every morning for 2 years, always invisible, always unnoticed. But that morning, I felt eyes on me even before I reached the doors. The security guard who usually nodded politely froze when he saw my face. His expression shifted from confusion to pity to discomfort in a matter of seconds. "Miss Moreno, you cannot go inside." I blinked, unsure if I had heard him correctly. "I work here. Not anymore." He slid a sealed envelope across the counter. My name was printed on the front in cold, bold letters. I opened it with trembling fingers and felt my stomach drop. Termination notice. Effective immediately. Reason: inappropriate conduct involving senior executive personnel. I shook my head as if that would somehow change the words. This is a mistake. I saved him. I saved his life. The guard lowered his voice. I know. I saw the real footage. But this came from corporate. HR. Legal. Someone high up. They said if you showed up today, I was to deny you entry. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. A few people passing through the lobby paused when they recognized me. One young woman whispered to her coworker, "That is her. The janitor who tried to kiss Mr. Blackburn while he was unconscious." My face flushed hot. That is not what happened. But my voice sounded small, drowned out by the echoing marble and the tap of expensive shoes across the floor. A man in a tailored suit laughed as he passed me. I know her type. So desperate for attention she would kiss a dying man. The words slapped me harder than any physical blow. I backed away from the counter, gripping the letter until it crumpled in my hand. I pushed through the revolving doors and stepped into the cold where the city noise felt louder, sharper, almost hostile. A bus drove by its digital screen, flashing a news headline that made my blood run cold. Viral video janitor crosses line with billionaire CEO. By the time I reached the sidewalk, my phone buzzed nonstop. Calls from unknown numbers, texts from people I barely remembered, and then the notifications. Hundreds of them. Comments, shares, reposts. Someone had taken the 10-second clip of me giving Ethan mouth to mouth and slowed it down, zoomed in, added music meant to sound seductive. The caption read, "She went for the kiss." He never saw it coming. I unlocked my phone and scrolled through the comments. Disgusting. She should be fired. She probably planned it. These women always do. Imagine being that desperate. I could not read anymore. I shoved the phone into my bag, but that did not silence the voices swirling in my head. I needed to breathe. I needed space. But space did not exist when your name was trending for all the wrong reasons. As I walked toward the bus stop, I felt eyes on me again. A man sitting at a nearby bench pointed at me and whispered to his friend, "That is her. Do you see it?" The friend snorted. "Looks exactly like someone who would try something like that." My throat tightened. I kept walking. Every step felt heavier, like the shame clung to my legs and tried to drag me down. When I reached home, the hallway felt darker than usual. Mrs. Jenkins, my neighbor from across the hall, poked her head out as I passed. Her eyes darted from my face to my uniform. I heard about what you did. She shook her head with disappointment. I thought you were a nice girl. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but she had already closed the door. Inside my apartment, I sank onto the floor, leaning against the peeling wall. My hands trembled as I held the crumpled termination letter. I had lost my job, my reputation, my dignity, all because the world decided to believe a lie that was easier to digest than the truth. For the first time since everything started, I let myself cry. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent, desperate tears that slid down my cheeks and dripped onto the letter in my lap. Part of me hoped the ink would smear, that the words would fade, that somehow I could erase the nightmare with my tears. But nothing changed. Not the letter, not the truth, not the world. When I finally stood up and wiped my face, something inside me hardened. The world might have humiliated me, but I still had a daughter to protect. Elena needed me, and even if every door had closed on me today, I would not let it destroy me completely. Not yet. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Elena coughing again, a tight, rattling wheeze that made my heart twist. I rushed to her bedside, helping her sit upright as she clutched her little stuffed cat. Her inhaler produced only a weak hiss when I pressed down. Empty. I knew it was empty last night, but seeing it fail in her hands made the truth hit harder. I checked my phone, hoping for a message from a hiring manager, an interview confirmation, anything that might mean a chance at a paycheck. Nothing. Just missed calls from unknown numbers and new headlines about the scandal. I set the phone aside before Elena could see. I did not want her to worry. Mommy will get your medicine today, I promise. Her eyes softened with trust, and that trust made my chest ache even more. After dressing her and dropping her off with our neighbor, who reluctantly agreed to watch her for a few hours, I grabbed a folder of resumes and stepped back out into a day that felt heavier than the last. The first place I went was a small motel near the bus station. The sign in the window said "Help Wanted Housekeeping." When I approached the front desk, the manager looked me over briefly, scanning my uniform, my tired eyes, my hopeful smile. He took my resume with polite indifference, but as soon as he typed my name into his computer, his expression shifted. "Oh, you are that woman, the one from the video." I swallowed nerves and tried to steady my voice. I saved his life. I was doing CPR. That was all. He nodded slowly but slid my resume back across the counter. "I am sorry, we cannot hire you. It would bring attention." The same pattern repeated at the next place, and the next, and the next. 6 buildings in total. 6 polite rejections that all shifted into stiff discomfort the moment they recognized my name. One woman at a cleaning agency did not bother pretending. She pointed at my resume like it was contaminated. "The internet thinks you assaulted your boss to get money. We cannot take that risk." I left before she could finish her sentence. Outside, the sky had turned gray and the air smelled like rain. Seattle felt colder that day, the wind sharper, the sidewalks harder beneath my worn shoes. I kept walking because the only thing worse than falling was stopping to feel it. My phone buzzed with notifications. News outlets kept posting about me using the word seduction instead of CPR. Someone on social media had exaggerated the story, adding details that never happened, and strangers ate it up like entertainment. Under one post, a person wrote, "She probably hoped he would wake up and marry her. Women like that will do anything for a check. Women like that. Like I was a category, a type, a joke." I closed the app, but the words stuck to me like glue. When I returned home to check on Elena, she ran to me with a picture she had drawn. It showed a smiling woman with a mop, a tall building, and a little girl holding her hand. "I made you this. It is us." I swallowed the pain rising in my throat. "Thank you, baby. It is beautiful." She smiled, proud of herself, unaware of the world outside our door turning against me. After giving her a snack and letting her nap, I stared at the pile of envelopes on the counter. One was from the clinic, past due. Another was from our landlord. Rent reminder. Due in 6 days. My heart raced as I made a list of things to sell. Elena's old stroller. A box of winter clothes. My microwave. Maybe the TV, even though it flickered half the time. I posted everything online for cheap and waited for replies. I needed money for inhaler medicine more than I needed anything else. I just needed someone to hire me long enough to keep my daughter breathing. By late afternoon, the rain came in sheets. I left Elena with the neighbor again and forced myself back out into the storm for one last attempt at work. A diner on the corner had a sign for night cleaning staff. The owner, an older woman with kind eyes, took my resume without looking it up first. For a moment, hope flickered in me. But when she stepped into the back to check something, I heard a young employee whisper loudly, "That is the girl who went viral for making out with her boss while he was dying." The owner returned with an apologetic expression that told me everything. I stood there in the doorway of the diner, drenched from the rain, feeling the last bit of hope slip through my fingers. The walk to the bus stop felt endless. My legs were heavy, my shoes soaked, my mind spiraling. Every breath felt harder. I kept thinking of Elena wheezing in her sleep, thinking of the inhaler I could not afford, thinking of the world that decided my fate without ever asking for the truth. When I reached the bus stop shelter, my vision blurred, the ground tilted, my knees buckled. I heard someone gasp nearby, but the sound felt distant, muffled, like it came from underwater. I collapsed onto the cold, wet pavement. The last thing I saw before the darkness closed in was a pair of shoes stepping around me, hurrying to catch the bus as if I were nothing more than a puddle someone tried to avoid. When Ethan Blackburn opened his eyes, the world came back to him in fragments, like someone had dropped his memories onto the floor and they shattered into uneven pieces. The first sound he heard was the steady beep of a heart monitor, then the whisper of shoes on polished hospital tiles, then the ache in his chest, deep and bruised, as if someone had pressed life back into him with their bare hands. For several seconds, he stared at the ceiling, unable to move, unable to understand why everything felt so heavy. A nurse entered the room and froze when she saw his eyes open. "Good morning, Mr. Blackburn. You gave us quite a scare." He tried to speak, but his throat felt raw and torn. "Water." She helped him sip from a cup, and when he swallowed, memories returned in flashes. The boardroom, the pressure in his chest, the cold floor, someone's hands, a voice telling him to breathe, a soft, urgent whisper saying, "Stay with me." He blinked, trying to steady himself as the nurse continued. "You went into cardiac arrest during your meeting. You were unresponsive for almost 2 minutes. 2 minutes sounded like a lifetime and also like a blink." He closed his eyes as another fragment hit him. A woman leaning over him, blonde hair damp with sweat, warm breath against his mouth, panic in her voice but determination in her hands, and then voices shouting. The nurse adjusted his IV and wrote down a note. When she stepped out, Ethan turned his head slowly, staring at the opposite wall as a single thought emerged like a whisper rising through fog. Who saved me? He needed to know. He pressed the call button. His assistant, Mark, arrived within half an hour with a laptop, a stack of messages, and a face pale with stress. "Sir, there has been a situation." Ethan cut him off with a hoarse, impatient rasp. "Who performed CPR on me?" Mark hesitated. He glanced toward the door as if debating whether to tell the truth. "A janitor, sir. Her name is Ava Marino. She saved your life." Ava. The name fit the voice in his memory. But before he could ask more, Mark continued in a hurried tone. "Sir, I think you should see what the media is saying." He opened the laptop and turned it toward Ethan. The screen lit with a paused video. Ethan stared at the thumbnail, confusion turning slowly into disbelief. It showed Ava leaning over him, her hands on his face, her mouth near his. The title beneath the video read, "Janitor Caught Kissing Unconscious CEO. Shock in Boardroom." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Play it." The 10-second clip rolled. It showed none of the compressions, none of the frantic life-saving work, none of the terror or urgency. Just the angle of her leaning over him, just enough to make it look wrong, just enough to twist a life-saving act into something predatory. Ethan felt heat rising in his chest, stronger than any pain from his surgery. Who posted this? Mark swallowed. It came from inside the company. Someone from PR leaked an edited version. They said they wanted to get ahead of rumors and control the narrative before the board panicked. Control the narrative. Of a woman saving his life. His heart pounded harder. He remembered the sensation of being pulled back from darkness. He remembered the first breath that tore into his lungs. He remembered her voice. "Come on, you are not done yet." That voice had not belonged to someone looking for attention or money. It belonged to someone fighting for a stranger. "Show me the real footage." Mark hesitated again. "Sir, the board thinks it is better if you rest and leave this to..." "Show me. Now." Mark relented and pulled up the raw security feed. Ethan watched in complete silence as the real events unfolded. His collapse, the panic, executives stepping back instead of forward. Ava bursting into the room, dropping to her knees, checking his pulse, starting compressions with perfect technique, her hands never shaking, her face never wavering, her body fighting exhaustion just to keep him alive. He watched himself jolt back to consciousness, watched her pull away the moment he breathed, watched a director scream at her, watched security grab her arms while she looked at him with fear, confusion, and exhaustion all mixed together. And then the moment that sickened him most. A PR staffer lifting her phone, angling it to capture only the part where Ava's face hovered above his. Deliberate, intentional, malicious. Ethan leaned back against his pillow, his breath shaking. "She saved me. She saved my life." "And this is what they did to her." Mark nodded grimly. "Sir, it gets worse. She was fired this morning, effective immediately, no severance, no review. Her access was revoked." He felt the room tilt slightly, not from illness, but from anger so sharp it made his vision tremble. Fired. Fired for saving him. Fired for being brave where others were cowardly. Fired because someone decided the story would look better if she became the villain. Ethan closed his eyes and the fragments of memory sharpened into a complete picture. Not the edited lie, the truth. Her voice calling him back, her hands pressing life into his chest, the look on her face when he woke. Not a kiss, not a scandal. A lifeline. "Find her," Ethan whispered. His voice cracked but carried steel beneath it. Mark blinked. "Find who, sir?" "Find Ava Moreno. Find out what happened to her. Where she is. How she is. Everything." Mark hesitated. "Sir, with respect, she might not want anything to do with the company after..." "Find her. Now." For a moment, the monitor beeped louder as Ethan's heart rate rose. And then he said something that startled even himself. "I am alive because of her, and it is time someone acted like it." I woke up in a white room that smelled like bleach and loneliness, the kind of smell that clung to hospital walls and never left. At first, I did not know where I was. My head felt heavy, my body weak, and for a moment I thought I was still lying on the cold pavement at the bus stop. My eyes opened slowly, and the ceiling came into focus. Too bright, too quiet, too clean to be anywhere I could afford. When I tried to lift my hand, an IV tube tugged at the back of it, taped clumsily to my skin. The motion sent a rush of pain through my shoulder and ribs, and my breath wavered. I tried to sit up, but the room swayed, blurring into a smear of muted colors. Then I heard it. A tiny sniffle. A child's sniffle. Elena. My heart lurched as I turned my head toward the sound. She sat curled in a vinyl chair beside my bed, her knees tucked up under her chin, her little stuffed cat pressed tight against her chest. Her eyes were puffy from crying, and her hair was tangled from hours of restless worry. One of her shoes had fallen to the floor, lying sideways like it had been dropped mid-panic. She must have been terrified. She must have seen everything. "Mommy!" Her voice trembled as she whispered the word. Her small fingers reached for me tentative, as if I might disappear if she touched me. I forced a smile, though every muscle in my face ached. "I am okay, sweetheart. Mommy is okay." My voice did not sound like mine. It was thin and cracked, like someone had dragged it across gravel before handing it back to me. Elena crawled onto the edge of the bed and pressed her forehead against my arm. I held her as tightly as my weak limbs allowed. She smelled like crayons and fear. "How long have you been here?" I asked softly. She shrugged. "A lady brought me. She said you fell asleep at the bus place." A lady. That meant someone had called an ambulance. Someone who cared enough to stop. Or maybe someone who felt guilty stepping over me. It did not matter. I was here now. Alive. Barely. Elena's breathing hitched, and she looked up at me with big, worried eyes. Are you going to leave me too? My heart cracked open. No, baby. Never. Never. But inside me, a terrifying whisper rose. What if I could not keep that promise? What if the world had already taken everything from me and was ready to take more? A nurse came in a few minutes later, checking my vitals, scribbling notes, smiling politely at Elena. You collapsed from exhaustion, dehydration, and severe stress. She said the words matter-of-fact, clinical, almost casual, as if collapsing in public was just another item on a long list of things poor women went through. You need rest fluids and food, and less stress, though I know that is easier said than done. I almost laughed. Less stress. As if I could choose that. As if my entire existence was not an endless cycle of fear, bills, survival, and now humiliation that had taken on a life of its own. When she left, the room fell quiet again. Too quiet. My thoughts grew loud, crashing over each other inside my skull. I have no job, no income, no way to pay rent, no way to buy Elena's medicine, no way to clear my name. I pressed my palm over my eyes, trying to steady my breath. I wanted to be strong in front of my daughter. I wanted to show her a mother who never broke, never bent, never faltered. But strength is not infinite. And that night, mine ran out. I stared at the ceiling and whispered the words I had been terrified to admit to myself. I do not know what to do anymore. Elena shifted closer, laying her tiny hand on top of mine. You do not have to be scared, Mommy. I will help you. The innocence in her voice felt like a blade and a blessing all at once. I kissed her knuckles, trying not to let the tears escape. The door creaked open again, a social worker this time. She asked me questions I barely had the energy to answer. Do you have support? Do you have stable housing? Do you have income? The more I said no, the more her expression shifted from professional concern to something that looked like pity. She left a stack of pamphlets on the table. Assistance programs, grant applications, emergency shelters. Things meant to help, but so complicated they often felt impossible for the people who actually needed them. When she was gone, I stared at the papers until the words blurred. I could not imagine taking my daughter into a shelter. I could not imagine losing our apartment. I could not imagine our life getting smaller than it already was. I tried calling a few places I had applied to earlier. Even from my hospital bed, I begged for work. Any work. I can scrub floors. I can clean kitchens. I can do night shifts. Please. But the responses came the same as before. We Googled your name. We cannot hire you. Not with this publicity. I pressed the phone against my forehead and shut my eyes. I felt myself cracking, fracturing in places that had once been strong. The shame, the panic, the helplessness. Elena curled back into the chair and watched me with quiet fear, too young to understand everything but old enough to sense her mother breaking. That was the moment it hit me. Not the scandal. Not the poverty. Not the humiliation. It was this. My daughter watching me collapse into someone I did not recognize. Watching me fall apart. Watching the world crush me until I became nothing but a shadow. That was the moment I broke. That night in that cold hospital room, I whispered into the darkness, I do not know how to survive this, and for the first time in my life, I meant it completely. I was half asleep when the door opened again, but something about the shift in the room made my eyes flicker open. The air changed heavier somehow, as if someone had walked in carrying a weight the room was too small to hold. At first, all I saw was a dark silhouette, standing just inside the doorway, framed by the faint hallway light. I thought it was another nurse, or maybe another social worker, ready to ask the same questions I could not answer. But then the figure stepped forward and my breath caught in my throat. It was him, Ethan Blackburn. Not in a suit this time, not polished, not rehearsed, not surrounded by assistants or cameras. He wore a gray sweater, simple and soft, the sleeves pushed halfway up his forearms as if he had left home in a hurry. His hair was slightly unruly, and there was a tiredness behind his eyes I had never imagined seeing on his face. A billionaire did not belong in a room like mine. Not in a place where the curtains were thin, the lights buzzed faintly, and the smell of disinfectant clung to everything. For a moment, I wondered if I was hallucinating, if stress and fever had finally cracked me open enough to imagine kindness where none existed. But then he took one more step toward me, slow and unsure, and my heart lurched with the realization that he was real. "Ava," he said quietly, and hearing my name in his voice startled something awake inside me. I shifted slightly, wincing as the IV line pulled. Elena woke with a tiny gasp, clutching her stuffed cat as she stared at him with wide eyes. He froze when he noticed her, his expression softening. I forced myself upright and swallowed, trying to steady the tremor in my voice. "Why are you here?" I tried to make it sound strong, but it came out hoarse, cracked, stitched together by exhaustion and fear. He looked down for a moment as if searching for the right words. Then he lifted a small paper bag from his hand and placed it gently on the bedside table. "Soup. Chicken noodle. Still warm. You have not eaten." The gesture, so simple and human, landed harder than any accusation I had received in the last 48 hours. Nobody had brought me anything warm in a long time. I opened my mouth to respond, but he continued pulling out a second item. This time, it was an inhaler, a brand new one, for your daughter. I felt something inside my chest break open, the kind of pain that came not from hurt, but from unexpected kindness after too much cruelty. Elena blinked at him, uncertain. He crouched down so he was eye level with her. "I thought you might need this." Her little fingers reached out and took the inhaler, holding it like it was treasure. She murmured thank you so quietly it was almost a breath. When he rose to his feet again, his eyes returned to mine, and the air in the room shifted again, thick with something unspoken. I stiffened, protective instinct flaring. "If you came here to silence me or threaten me, you do not have to bother. I have nothing left to take." His face changed instantly, pain flickering through his eyes. "That is not why I am here." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folder. He set it beside the soup on the table, tapping it once with the edge of his fingers. "These are internal documents, HR files, email chains, PR directives, everything they used to justify firing you." The room buzzed faintly as the fluorescent lights flickered. I stared at the folder as if it might burn me. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because what happened to you was wrong, completely wrong. You were terminated without cause, without protocol, without even a proper investigation. They acted without consulting me, without informing me." I clenched the blanket beneath my fingers. "Of course they fired me. You almost died in front of them. I touched you. They blamed me." "No." His voice sharpened with conviction. "They blamed you because they needed someone small enough to sacrifice. Someone the media could tear apart without consequence. Someone the board would never defend. Someone without power. Someone invisible." The word invisible hit me harder than I expected. For years, I had lived like that, fading into hallways, ignored in elevators, walked past in silence. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "But you were the only one in that room who moved. The only one who acted. The only one who saved me." My breath shook. A part of me wanted to believe him. Another part was terrified to. He continued, voice steady but low, as if afraid the walls might distort his honesty. I watched the full footage. "Every second. You saved my life. And then your life was destroyed for it." Anger flickered in his eyes, sharp and sincere. This was not corporate politeness, not damage control. This was something else, something human. I had not seen humanity in days. He looked toward Elena again. She had fallen asleep with her head resting on my hip, the new inhaler clutched in her small hand like a lifeline. Something softened in his expression as he watched her. She should not have to see her mother go through this. No child should. I swallowed, unable to answer. He reached into his coat once more and pulled out a small plush toy, a soft gray kitten with embroidered whiskers. "I found this in the hospital gift shop. I did not know what she liked, but I thought." He trailed off as he placed it gently next to Elena. A sigh escaped me. I did not expect kindness from him. Not after everything. not from someone whose life existed in a world made of glass towers and wealth beyond anything I could imagine. He stepped backward toward the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. "One last thing," he said. "When I woke up in the hospital, the first thing I remembered was your voice telling me to breathe. You did not know me. You did not wait for permission. You did not hesitate. You saved me." His next words dropped into the room like a tremor. "Let me try to save what they took from you." And then he was gone, leaving the door open just wide enough for light to slip through. The morning after Ethan's visit, I woke to the sound of footsteps echoing down the hospital hallway, fast and purposeful, like the building itself had picked up a heartbeat. I was sitting upright this time, still weak, but more alert, watching Elena draw on the back of an old medical form with the purple crayon she kept in her pocket. She hummed softly, unaware of how fragile the world around us still was. I reached out to smooth her hair, but before my hand touched her, the television mounted in the corner flickered on. I had forgotten it was even there. A news anchor's voice filled the room, calm, but charged with something like anticipation. "Breaking news from Blackburn Dynamics. CEO Ethan Blackburn is expected to make a public statement within the hour." I froze, the words wrapped around my chest like a band tightening. Elena looked up from her drawing. "Mommy, is that about you?" I forced a smile and shook my head, avoiding an answer I did not have yet. When she returned to her coloring, I stared at the TV, trying to decide whether to turn it off or let it keep talking. In the end, I left it on. Maybe because a part of me was afraid of whatever was coming, and another part was terrified to miss it. A nurse entered with a tray of breakfast. She kept glancing at the TV, then at me as if connecting dots in real time. I wondered how many people in this hospital had seen that awful edited video. How many had looked at me over the past 24 hours and judged me without knowing a thing about me. When the nurse left, I exhaled slowly and picked at the toast, my stomach too tight to eat. I kept replaying Ethan's words from the night before. "Let me try to save what they took from you." I wanted to believe him. I truly did. But men like him did not need to follow through. Their promises came from comfortable places, safe places, rooms with doors that opened for them no matter what. People like me lived in hallways that led nowhere. Then the broadcast cut to a live feed. Rows of cameras, reporters jostling for position, microphones lined up like weapons. At the podium stood Ethan Blackburn. For a moment, he said nothing. He simply looked out at the sea of journalists, his expression steady but solemn. He had shaved and he wore a dark navy suit, but something in his posture was different. Less CEO, more man. "Good morning," he said. His voice was firm, almost unnervingly calm. "I am here today to address the truth." The room on the screen went still, as if everyone sensed a shift coming. Ethan continued. "2 days ago, during a meeting with my executive team, I went into sudden cardiac arrest. I lost consciousness. I stopped breathing. I died for nearly 2 minutes." The reporters leaned forward. A few murmured. Ethan paused, letting the weight of his own words settle. "I am alive today because of one person, a woman named Ava Moreno, a janitor working 2 floors below our boardroom. She heard shouting. She ran to help. She performed CPR for several minutes while others stood back. Her actions kept me alive long enough for medics to arrive. My hand flew to my mouth. My breath hitched. Elena looked up at the TV again, her eyes wide. Ethan pressed a button on the podium. Behind him, a massive screen lit up. Then the raw security footage began to play. Not the edited clip, not the doctored scandal. The truth. The real truth. It showed me bursting into the room, dropping onto my knees beside him, my hands pressing into his chest, sweat on my forehead, the desperation in my movements, the urgency in every breath I gave him. It was all there, every second of it. A few reporters gasped aloud. A man whispered something like, "She saved him. She actually saved him." The video ended. Ethan stepped forward again. What the world saw initially was a distorted, maliciously edited clip released without my consent. It did not show the CPR. It did not show her saving my life. It showed only a carefully framed angle meant to shame her, to reduce her to a headline. He let that sink in, his jaw tight, his eyes cold with anger that did not feel performative. The company failed her. Leadership failed her. And I failed her by not speaking sooner. Reporters erupted with questions, shouting over each other. Ethan raised a hand and the room fell quiet. Effective immediately, all disciplinary actions against Ms. Moreno are reversed. The individuals responsible for releasing the edited video have been terminated, and a full investigation is underway to ensure nothing like this ever happens again. My throat tightened. I felt tears pushing forward before I could stop them. He did not stop there. I want to publicly apologize to Ms. Moreno, not just as her CEO, but as the man whose life she saved. No worker should ever be punished for doing the right thing. No one should lose their dignity because the world chooses a lie over the truth. A reporter raised her hand. "Mr. Blackburn, have you spoken with Ms. Moreno directly?" Ethan's answer was immediate. "Yes, and I plan to continue ensuring she receives every support she needs." Another reporter asked, "Do you believe she deserves compensation?" Ethan took a breath. "I believe she deserves justice. I believe she deserves safety, and I believe she deserves every opportunity she was denied because of this." I covered my mouth with both hands as emotion flooded me. Elena touched my arm gently, confused, but smiling because I was smiling. "Mommy, he is talking about you." My tears slipped free. I had not felt seen in years. Not truly, not fully. And now, a room full of strangers, a nation full of viewers, was hearing my name spoken with respect instead of ridicule. Ethan ended the conference with words that hit harder than everything before combined. "Ms. Moreno is not the villain of this story. She is the hero." When the broadcast ended, the room fell quiet except for the sound of my shaking breath. I had spent 2 days drowning under lies, and in one moment the truth pulled me to the surface. I was discharged from the hospital 2 days after the press conference, still weak, still shaken, but finally breathing without feeling like the world was collapsing on top of me. Elena held my hand tightly as we walked out into the cool Seattle air. For the first time in days, I felt the warmth of sunlight on my face instead of the cold judgment of strangers. People recognized me now, but their expressions were different. Softer, curious. Some even nodded with a hint of respect. A barista handing out samples outside the cafe stopped me. "You are Ava Wright, the janitor who saved him." When I nodded, she smiled and said, "Thank you for what you did." The simple kindness nearly brought me to tears again. Elena squeezed my hand and whispered, "See, Mommy, they know you are good." I wanted to believe that things were changing, but deep inside fear still lived in the parts of me the world had bruised. The truth had gone public, yes, but my life had not magically rebuilt itself overnight. I still had no job, no income, no stability, and too many questions with no answers. So when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number, I hesitated before picking up. "Ms. Moreno, this is Mark, Mr. Blackburn's assistant. Mr. Blackburn would like to meet with you at the office, whenever you feel well enough." My pulse jumped. Going back to Blackburn Tower felt like walking into the eye of a storm I barely survived. But something in me, maybe courage or maybe desperation, made me agree. "I can come today," I said softly, though my stomach twisted at the words. "Good. We will expect you shortly." The line went dead, leaving my heart pounding. I looked down at Elena. "Do you want to come with me?" She nodded instantly. She always wanted to be wherever I was, especially now, when fear lived in places she did not have words for yet. We took the bus to downtown. This time, people did look at me, but not with disgust, not with accusation. Some even whispered, "That is her, the hero." The word felt too big for my chest, too heavy, too unreal. When Blackburn Tower came into view, a shiver ran down my spine. Memories flooded me. The day I saved a life. The day I lost mine. The day cameras cornered me and security dragged me out like a criminal. I almost turned back. But Elena squeezed my fingers and said, "Mommy, you can do it!" Her small bravery felt stronger than anything inside me, so I walked inside. The same lobby, the same marble floors. But everything felt different. The guard who once stopped me now straightened up and opened the gate without hesitation. "Welcome back, Ms. Moreno." I blinked at him stunned, but he simply gestured me through with a warm nod. Mark met us near the elevators, offering a polite smile. "Mr. Blackburn is waiting. He is looking forward to speaking with you." The elevator doors opened, and as they closed behind us, my heart thudded harder with every rising floor. When we reached the executive level, I felt a familiar ache in my chest. I remembered running down this hallway to save a man who had been dying. I remembered leaving it moments later, humiliated and destroyed. Mark opened the corner office door for me. Inside stood Ethan. He rose from his seat when he saw us, not with the air of a CEO greeting an employee, but with something gentler, something human. "Ava, thank you for coming." His voice was steady, but there was sincerity woven into it, the kind that made my throat tighten. I nodded and guided Elena toward a nearby couch. She sat down quietly, hugging her plush kitten while staring around the room with wide eyes. Ethan motioned for me to sit across from him. When I did, he slid a slim folder across the desk toward me. I stared at it, afraid of what it might contain. A settlement. A confidentiality agreement. A legal threat. My breath hitched. "What is this?" "A new role," he said calmly. "A chance for something better. For you." I swallowed hard. "I do not understand." Ethan leaned back slightly. "I want to build a workplace dignity initiative, a department dedicated to ensuring that no worker, no matter their job title, is ever invisible again. I want to address the things that allowed what happened to you to happen in the first place." Silence stretched between us as I stared at him, unsure whether to believe him. "And I want you to lead it," he continued. My breath left me entirely. Lead me. The words did not compute. I shook my head. "I do not have a degree. I do not know how to run a program. I have never worked in an office. People will not take me seriously." He smiled, not mockingly, but warmly reassuringly. "You do not need a degree to understand human dignity. You do not need a diploma to know how people treat those they believe are beneath them. You lived through what this initiative is meant to fix. You know exactly what needs to change." I stared at the folder with trembling hands. Inside would be a salary, benefits, stability, a chance to reclaim my life. But the fear inside me, the fear born from years of being invisible, rose like a tide. What if I fail? Ethan shook his head. "You will not. And even if you stumble, you will stumble forward. People like you always do." Before I could respond, a small tug pulled at my sleeve. Elena stood beside me holding a picture she had drawn on the hospital paper. This one was different. It showed me standing beside a tall man, and between us, a building with a bright red heart drawn on it. Elena whispered, "Mommy, you saved someone. Maybe now you can save yourself too." My eyes stung. I looked at the picture, then at Ethan, then at the folder waiting like a door I was terrified to open. But I knew deep in my bones that this was the moment everything could change. Slowly, with a breath that trembled through my entire body, I opened the folder, and my world shifted. The first day, I walked into Blackburn Tower not as a janitor, but as the newly appointed community liaison for the Workplace Dignity Initiative. My knees almost buckled beneath me. The badge hanging around my neck looked too official, too clean, too unlike anything I had ever worn. Elena had drawn a tiny pink heart on the back of it that morning for good luck. I pressed my thumb over it every few minutes, grounding myself in something small and familiar as everything around me felt impossibly large. The elevator ride to the upper floors felt different this time. People glanced at me with curiosity instead of dismissal. Some smiled awkwardly, unsure of what the proper etiquette was for greeting a woman who had gone viral as both a villain and then a hero within the same week. I kept my gaze steady, repeating in my head that I belonged here, even if a loud, frightened part of me still did not believe it. When the elevator opened, I stepped into a hallway lined with glass offices and sleek desks, the executive floor, the place I had once sprinted into to save a life and been dragged out of minutes later like a criminal. Now I walked it slowly, intentionally, reminding myself that this time I was invited. This time I had a purpose. Mark, Ethan's assistant, appeared from around the corner with his usual polite smile. "Morning, Ava. You ready for your orientation?" I laughed nervously. "Ready is a strong word." He chuckled and motioned for me to follow him. He gave me a tour of the floor, pointing out conference rooms, shared workspaces, emergency exits, and departments I had never stepped foot near in all my years of cleaning downstairs hallways. We stopped near a long table in a communal workspace where several managers sat sipping coffee and scrolling through their tablets. The moment they saw me, their expressions shifted. Some stiffened. Some frowned. One woman whispered something to the man beside her. I caught only one word. Janitor. The word hit harder than it should have. It should not have hurt me, not after everything. Not after Ethan himself cleared my name. But people do not rewrite their biases overnight. Mark cleared his throat loudly, forcing them to look up from their devices. This is Ava. She will be leading the Workplace Dignity Initiative. She will be observing, interviewing, and collaborating with staff at all levels. She will be reporting directly to Mr. Blackburn. Their expressions froze. Reporting. Directly. To the CEO. Suddenly, no one touched their tablet. No one whispered. No one even blinked. I felt exposed, standing there as if the clothes I wore were still a uniform stained with cleaning chemicals. I forced a smile, stepped forward, and held out my hand. Hi, nice to meet you all. The woman who whispered earlier hesitated before shaking my hand. Her fingers were limp, her smile strained. Welcome, she said through tight lips. I pretended not to notice the tension. I had lived my whole life in rooms where people thought they were better than me. This time, I did not let it shrink me. After introductions, Mark led me to a small office that had been prepared for me on the same floor but tucked away in a quieter corner. It was nothing like the grand offices other executives had. It was modest with a single desk, a chair, and a bulletin board pinned with blank sheets for future initiatives. But when I stepped inside, something fluttered warmly in my chest. This room was mine. My name printed on the frosted glass door proved it. For a moment, I let myself smile. Really smile. I sat at the desk, feeling the unfamiliar weight of a keyboard beneath my fingertips. An inbox full of welcome messages waited for me, along with several meeting invitations. I clicked through them slowly, absorbing the reality of this new world I was now part of. Then came the hardest part, the work itself. I began meeting with staff, starting with those who held the least power: the janitors, the cafeteria workers, the overnight security guards. Every story left an ache in my chest. A cleaner who had been mocked by managers for her accent. A cafeteria worker who had not received benefits in 3 years despite promises. A security guard who had been ignored so often he joked he was part of the wallpaper. Listening hurt because their stories felt like pieces of mine, but it also made me stronger because I knew exactly what I needed this initiative to do. By noon, I had multiple pages of notes. I went to the break room to refill my water, and that was when the second wave of resistance hit. 3 managers stood near the coffee machine whispering not quietly enough. I heard my name again, this time followed by laughter. So she is in charge of dignity. A woman snorted. She cleaned bathrooms a week ago. Now she thinks she can tell us how to treat people. Another added, this is what happens when CEOs feel guilty. They hand out pity positions. They did not know I was behind them until I reached for the water dispenser. The laughter died instantly. Awkward silence filled the room. One of them tried to recover. Oh, Ava, we were just talking about the initiative. I looked at them evenly. I know what you were talking about. Their faces flushed. I wanted to shrink away, but I remembered Elena's words. You saved someone. Now save yourself too. So I squared my shoulders and said softly but firmly, respect has nothing to do with job titles. You do not have to like me, but you will treat me with the dignity you expect for yourselves. They stared at me stunned, not because my words were rude, but because I finally believed them myself. After lunch, Ethan invited me to his office. Stepping inside felt surreal, the view from the floor-to-ceiling windows stretching across the entire city. He stood near his desk reviewing a document but looked up immediately when I entered. How was your first day? I hesitated. Hard. Good. Hard again. I think that means I am doing something right. He smiled faintly. Progress always feels uncomfortable at first. That is how you know it is real. He asked about the people I met, the stories I heard, the early plans I had forming in my mind. For the first time in my career, someone with power listened to me. Not because I was desperate, not because I was convenient, but because I mattered. By the end of the meeting, he nodded approvingly. "You are going to change this place, Ava. I hope you know that." As I walked out of his office, the weight of his words settled over me like a promise. Not a burden, a beginning. That evening, when I picked up Elena from school, she ran into my arms with pure joy. "Mommy, did you save anything today?" I kissed her forehead and whispered, "I think I saved a little piece of myself." The meeting room on the 15th floor was nothing like the polished boardroom where my life had changed weeks earlier. There were no marble tables, no panoramic windows, no designer chairs meant to intimidate. Instead, rows of folding chairs filled the space, arranged unevenly, some wobbling slightly on the old carpet. The fluorescent lights flickered in a stubborn rhythm, humming low like tired lungs. But the room was full, not of executives, not of managers. It was filled with the people who kept the building breathing. Night shift janitors with bleach stains on their sleeves. Cafeteria workers who spent their breaks cleaning tables instead of resting. Maintenance crews with calloused hands and weary eyes. Security guards who had stood unseen for years. Faces etched with exhaustion. Faces that looked surprised to have been invited into any meeting that wasn't about budget cuts. Faces that for the first time in a long time looked like they were waiting for something good. I stood at the front of the room, my palms damp, my throat tight, my heart pounding harder than it ever had in my entire life. Even saving a billionaire had not scared me as much as speaking to this room did. Ethan stood in the back, not on stage, not beside me, not towering over anyone. He blended into the crowd, intentionally, arms crossed loosely, watching like someone who came to witness, not control. His presence steady, silently encouraging. When the last few workers entered and found seats, I stepped forward. The room fell quiet in a way that was different from fear. It felt more like a held breath. I looked at them, these people whose stories I had collected over the past days, their struggles, their mistreatment, their resilience, their invisibility. I swallowed and began. My voice trembled at first. I used to scrub these floors while people walked past me without ever seeing me. My hands tightened slightly at my sides, not because they were cruel, but because no one ever taught them to look. A ripple of recognition moved through the room. Heads nodded. A few eyes dropped to the floor. I continued. For years, I believed that being invisible was normal, that silence was part of the job, that dignity was a luxury for people on the higher floors. I paused, letting the truth settle. Then, one day, I ran into a room to save someone's life. And in 10 seconds, the world decided who I was. Murmurs stirred. People shifted in their seats, leaning forward. That day, I learned something. I learned that when you do not have power, the story others tell about you becomes louder than the truth. A soft gasp escaped from somewhere in the back. I took another breath, voice steadying deeper into its purpose. But I also learned this. No one is born to be invisible. Not you, not me, not anyone in this room. Something shifted in the air, a quiet strength, a spark. I stepped closer to them, speaking not from a place of authority, but from a place of shared survival. This initiative is not about fixing policies. It is about fixing a culture that forgot the value of the people who make this place run. People who wake up at 3 a.m. to take buses in the rain. People who work double shifts and eat lunch standing up. People who give so much and receive so little. I paused and let my gaze sweep across the room. Until now. Silence again. But not empty silence. Heavy, meaningful silence. The kind that comes when people realize they are being seen in ways they never expected. I finished softly. Starting today, no voice in this building will go unheard. Not on my watch. For a heartbeat, the room was still. Frozen. Then someone in the second row began to clap. Slow. Unsure. Then someone else joined. Then another. And another. Until a rising wall of applause filled the entire room, echoing off the thin walls, vibrating through my chest. I felt my breath catch as the applause grew louder, stronger, more certain. These were not polite claps, not corporate claps. These were the claps of people who had swallowed their dignity for years and were finally tasting it again. A few workers wiped their eyes. One man in a maintenance uniform pressed the heels of his hands against his face, trying to hide tears he could not control. When the applause finally softened, people approached me one by one. A cafeteria worker whispered, "Thank you for saying what no one ever said." A security guard placed a hand gently on my shoulder. I have been here 15 years. No one ever asked how I was doing. Not once. A janitor who reminded me of myself smiled through trembling lips. "You made me feel human again." Each word struck something deep inside me, a place that had been bruised for years. I knew the initiative would not fix everything overnight, but for the first time, I believed it could be the beginning of something real. As the crowd thinned, I began collecting stray papers from the chairs, grounding myself in a task that felt familiar, and that was when I saw it. On my small desk in the corner sat a bouquet of white daisies, simple, modest, beautiful in their sincerity. Tucked among the stems was a small handwritten note. My breath caught as I opened it. For the woman who refused to let me die when everyone else did nothing. E. My heart swelled full and aching in a way that made it hard to breathe. Not romantic, not dramatic. Something quieter. Respect. Gratitude. Recognition. A moment I had never expected in my life. I pressed the card against my palm, letting the warmth behind the words settle into me. Someone cleared their throat softly behind me. I turned, half expecting Ethan, but it was one of the older janitors, a man with silver hair and tired eyes. His voice shook as he said, "Ava, today you stood for us. And I want you to know something. Today we stood for you, too." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the truth of that wash over me. For years I had been invisible. Today, I was not alone. That night, after the meeting that had left my heart fuller than it had ever been, I walked home with a strange new feeling pulsing inside me. Not victory, not pride. Something softer, something steadier, like the quiet glow of a light you did not know you had been walking toward for years. When I reached our apartment building, Elena ran to meet me in the hallway, barefoot, still in her pajamas, holding her worn pink cat plush against her chest. "Mommy, you are home." I scooped her up, breathing in the scent of shampoo and crayons, grounding myself in the warmth of her small arms around my neck. She looked at me with her wide brown eyes full of curiosity. "Did you save anything today?" I smiled, brushing a curl from her forehead. "I think I saved a little more of our future." She giggled and wrapped her arms tighter around me. I carried her up the stairs to our apartment. When I opened the door, the familiar space felt different. Not bigger, not nicer, just lighter, as if something in the air had shifted, loosened, softened. After dinner, after bath time, after Elena insisted on drawing a picture of me standing in front of a crowd with sparkles around my head, she finally fell asleep on the couch beside me, curled up under her favorite blanket. I tucked her in gently, then stepped outside onto the small balcony that overlooked the street below. The city hummed beneath me, a low, constant vibration like a living heartbeat. Seattle lights shimmered in the distance, glowing against the dark sky. Even from here, I could see the towering silhouette of Blackburn Tower standing tall above the skyline. One window near the top floor glowed brighter than the rest. My breath caught when I recognized it. Ethan's office. It was late, far later than any CEO should still be working, but something about that single lit window felt intentional, steady, present. A quiet echo of everything that had shifted between us since the day he walked into my hospital room with soup and a folder that changed everything. I leaned against the balcony railing, wrapping my arms around myself against the cool evening air. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to just feel. No collapsing, no fear, no rushing to survive, just standing, breathing, existing. I whispered into the night, half to myself, half to whatever future I hoped was finally waiting. I never thought I would get to step out of the dark like this. The wind brushed my face gently as if in answer. Behind me, the apartment was quiet, except for the soft breathing of my daughter. Ahead of me in the distance across the city, one window stayed lit. As I watched it, memories rushed through me like a fast-moving river. The moment Ethan collapsed, the panic, the desperation, the way my hands pressed into his chest, praying he would breathe again, his first breath returning beneath my palms, the way my life unraveled in the days that followed, the humiliation, the job rejections, the fear in Elena's coughing, the cold floor beneath me when I fainted at the bus stop. And then, the moment everything shifted, Ethan standing beside my hospital bed, voice steady but full of remorse. Chicken soup, a folder of truth, a second chance. I blinked hard, feeling tears at the edges of my vision but not letting them fall. Not out of pain, not anymore, out of gratitude, out of awe. Out of the strange miracle that something so devastating had cracked open a door that had never existed for me before. I looked back at Elena sleeping through the sliding glass door, her little hand resting on top of her pink plush cat. For her, this was everything. A safer home. A mother who was no longer drowning. A future that no longer felt like a shrinking hallway with no exit. I stepped back inside, closing the door quietly so the cold would stay out and the warmth of this fragile new beginning would stay in. I sat beside Elena, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. Her face relaxed into a small smile, even in sleep. "Mommy is different now," I whispered. "And so is our life." A buzzing sound vibrated softly from my phone on the kitchen counter. A text message. My heart jumped, unsure why, until I saw the name glowing on the screen. Ethan. The message was simple. "I saw the footage of your meeting today. They believe in you. They needed you. And I hope you know I believe in you too." A warmth spread through my chest, slow and steady like sunlight creeping over a horizon. I typed back before I could second-guess myself. "Thank you. For everything." His reply came almost immediately. "This is only the beginning, Ava. You deserve so much more than the world ever gave you." I stared at the words, absorbing them like medicine for a wound I had carried far too long. Then, with the phone still in my hand, I walked back to the balcony. The window in Blackburn Tower was still glowing. I lifted my gaze toward it, and even though I could not see him, I felt him there. Not watching me, not hovering, just existing in the same moment. Two people in different towers of the same city, connected not by obligation or debt, but by something quieter and more real. Healing, respect, hope. I exhaled slowly, letting the night fill my lungs. Elena murmured something in her sleep behind me, a small sound of comfort, like a dream without fear. I whispered into the open sky. "I am seen now. I am seen." A truth I never thought I would get to claim. Across the city, the single glowing window flickered softly, then remained steady. And standing there on my balcony, holding on to the railing with both hands, I finally understood the strangest part of all. I had saved a life that day. But I did not know then that saving him would be the beginning of saving myself, too. If this story touched something deep within you, I want to invite you to sit with that feeling for just a moment. Let it settle. Let it breathe. Let it remind you of something we all tend to forget as we rush our way through the world. Sometimes the smallest acts of courage do not belong to the strongest or the wealthiest. Sometimes they come from the people no one notices. Sometimes they come from the ones who are tired, overworked, overlooked, but still choose to show up with a heart wide open. And sometimes, like in Ava's story, those quiet acts of courage end up saving more than one life. They reshape a future. They reveal truths that have been ignored. They wake up a world that desperately needs reminding of what humanity looks like. If you are listening to this right now, maybe you have felt invisible at some point in your life. Maybe you have worked jobs where no one looked you in the eye. Maybe you have loved people who did not love you back the way you hoped. Maybe you have carried burdens that no one else ever saw. Or maybe, just maybe, you have been the one who held a door open for someone who slammed one in your face. Whatever you have lived through, whatever your journey has been, you deserve to be seen. You deserve to be valued. You deserve to take up space in this world without apologizing for it. Ava's story is not just about a billionaire and a janitor. It is about the quiet truth that people carry dignity, even when the world pretends they do not. It is about the strength it takes to keep going when life is heavier than your spirit can hold. It is about the way kindness can ripple outward and touch lives you never meant to touch. And yes, it is about hope, the kind that grows slowly in the dark before anyone knows it is there. If you stayed all the way to this moment, then your heart is a little like mine, a little like Ava's, a little like anyone who has ever been knocked down and decided to rise again. Stories like this are not just entertainment. They are reminders. They remind us that people matter, choices matter, courage matters, and that sometimes the world breaks us just enough to let the light in. Here on this channel, that is what we believe in. We believe in the quiet power of the everyday person. We believe in second chances. We believe in stories that heal, stories that challenge, stories that make us pause and look at each other with a little more gentleness. So if Ava's journey stirred something inside you, if it made you feel a spark of recognition or a moment of softness or even a tear you did not expect, I want to ask you from the heart to stay with us. Be part of this space. Be part of this growing community of people who still believe in goodness and change and the possibility of redemption. Your support helps these stories reach others who may need them. Someone out there tonight might be sitting alone, feeling invisible, feeling forgotten, feeling like the world has already written their ending. And maybe this story or the next one will be the reminder they need to hold on a little longer. You can help bring that light to them. So if this story meant something to you, take a second to like this video. It may seem like a small gesture, but small gestures are often the ones that change the most. And if you want to walk with us through more stories of courage, hope, and humanity, consider subscribing. Every time you do, you help keep these stories alive. You help create a corner of the internet that feels a little warmer, a little kinder, a little more like the world we wish we lived in. Thank you for being here. Thank you for feeling with us. Thank you for giving your time, your heart, and your attention to a story that needed to be told. Wherever you are tonight, whatever weight you may be carrying, I hope you remember this one simple truth. You are seen, you are valued, and your story matters too.